Good afternoon. If you can take your seats, we're about to begin. Welcome, everybody. Shalom. It's an honor and a privilege to be here with each and every one of you. And a special welcome to our friends that are watching here on Zoom, those that are with us live, especially from Northern California. This is amazing. And our friends that are with us live and those that are with us later. You know, I was in Jerusalem on Saturday night this week. Hannah and I were in Jerusalem and we decided to take a walk to the Western Wall. As we're leaving the old city, we parked outside of the old city. You know, there's the Dung Gate nearest to the Western Wall. We parked outside the Dung Gate. So we're walking out from the Western Wall, outside of the walls of the old city. And I hear Hannah's planning a trip to Israel, God willing, for the community trip to Israel, God willing. So speak to Hannah. And as we're walking outside of the Dung Gate, a Jew with a shtreimel, you know, a big shtreimel, the fox tail, Hasidic Jew, he stops me at the gate and he says, "You're from Florida." I'm like, yeah. He says to his son next to him, "Call mommy." Mommy comes over, and I'm with Hannah, my daughter, and he's with his wife and son. And she becomes flustered, and she says, "You know, you're Rabbi Vigler, and this is your wife, Hannah. I follow Hannah on Instagram, it must be on her daily Torah study. And she studies here with us on YouTube. The family lives in Borough Park. And it was a very, very special encounter for us to be able to be at the gates of the old city and to be able to learn, to meet people that we've never met before that apparently know us a lot better than we know them. So thank you for enabling this global community, this worldwide wisdom." I'd like to begin today with a short story about a Harvard Business School graduate who arrives to celebrate his graduation on the beaches of Mexico, only to discover that it's 2:00 in the afternoon, and he sees a young fisherman in his early 20s bring his boat back from the sea, wrap up his fishing equipment, and seem to retire for the day. It's only 2:00. Unable to restrain himself, the Harvard Business School graduate comes over to the young fisherman and he says, "What are you doing? Why are you ending your day, your work day? It's only 2:00. So he says, "What do you mean? I caught enough fish to support myself for today. I'm good." "Well, where are you going?" He says, "I'm going home, have lunch with my wife, then I'll take a nap, and then I'll sit with my friends on the beach and watch the sunset. What should I be doing?" So the business graduate says, let me teach you something. If you were to go back into the water now, you'd be able to earn extra. You'd have more fish than you need. You'd be able to save some money. And as you do that, you could save some money to buy yourself a bigger boat. Then with the extra money, if you work all day, every day, you could take the bigger boat, catch more fish. You'd be able to even hire other fishermen to work for you. You might be able to even start a company with a whole fleet. Eventually, you might be able to even export your fish and sell your company. Who knows? You could even go public. Okay, sounds amazing, says the Mexican fisherman. But what would I do then? Well, if you'd be able to sell your company, you'd have so much money that you could just retire early. Well, what would I do then? Well, in that case, you'd be able to have lunch with your wife, take a nap, watch the sunset with your friends on the beach. Well, I do that already. Why would I need to work so hard in order to reach there? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Life, we know what that is. Liberty, we know what that is. But happiness, we're not quite sure. It's the pursuit of happiness, and that's what today's course is about. It's about the Kabbalah of meaning as we try to figure out how we can uncover meaning in our lives, to live lives that are more fulfilled, more purposeful, more present. What wisdom can the Torah, can the depths of ancient Jewish mysticism of Kabbalah teach us in this quest for happiness and for meaning? King Solomon was known as the wisest of all men. He wrote 3 amazing books, and I encourage you to read them. They're all part of the Torah. The first one is Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs. Anybody heard of that one? Song of Songs is a poem of romance, which, by the way, the sages wanted to ban when they heard about it, until they realized that it was actually a metaphor to the love between God and the chosen people. And that's why they allowed it to be canonized within the Torah. The second book he wrote was Mishlei, known as Proverbs, which is life wisdom. But the final book that he wrote, the culmination of his wisdom, is the book of Kohelet, which translates into a language that I do not know, Ecclesiastes. Is that even English? What is that, Latin? Ecclesiastes, Kohelet. So the book of Kohelet is about the nature of existence. It's all of the deepest affirmations and awarenesses and realizations that King Solomon, the wisest of all men, has come up with. If you look in the addendum of today's class, at the very end of lesson 1, you'll see a whole pictograph of the summary of the book of Kohelet with select excerpts from the book of Ecclesiastes. I think you'll have a good time. You can enjoy it. But in this book of Kohelet, in Ecclesiastes, King Solomon begins the book with a downer on our aspiration to find meaning in life. Here's how he starts it. He says, all is futile, only the earth endures forever. Take a look at text number 1 on page 3. He tells us the words of, these are the opening words of the book of Kohelet, the words of Kohelet, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Futility of futilities, said Kohelet. Futility of futilities, all is futile. What profit is man in all his toil that he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but only the earth endures forever. A little depressing. King Solomon is saying, listen, I've been there, done that. You're wasting your time. It's not even worth the effort. Carl Jung, modern day philosopher, has a very interesting comment when he says that about 1/3, he was a psychoanalyst, right? He says that about 1/3 of my cases are not suffering from any form of clinical neurosis, but from the senselessness and aimlessness of their lives. Today, we are experiencing a crisis of meaninglessness when our lives are reduced to mattress sales on Memorial Day and car sales on Labor Day weekend. We realize that life is just too shallow. Life is just too superficial. There's a mental health pandemic of meaninglessness. Take a look at Lisa Miller, PhD, describing the state of today's mental health. Page 3, it's text number 2. She says depression, anxiety, and substance abuse have reached epidemic proportions globally. In 2017, 66.6 million Americans, more than half of the respondents on the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, reported binge drinking within the past month. Wow. And 20 million met the criteria for substance abuse disorder. 20 million Americans. Wow. 31% of American adults will develop a full-blown anxiety disorder at some point in their lives, and 19% in any given year. The World Health Organization reports that 264 million people on the planet are depressed. Depression is the 3rd most costly disability worldwide. Each year, 17 million American adults are depressed. Over 16% of youth in late adolescence currently face depression, and the impact of depression on suicide accounts for the 2nd leading cause of death in adolescence, rivaled only by death by auto accidents. So after car accidents, the 2nd most intense cause of death is depression. While the stakes of our mental health crisis are truly life and death, many of us also suffer from less debilitating, though still painful conditions like burnout and chronic stress, trouble concentrating and connecting, loneliness and isolation, lives that are rich in many ways, yet feel somehow narrow, hollow, and cut off. Even when we experience success and satisfaction, we may sense that there's more to happiness, that life could be more joyful, rewarding, and meaningful. Yet despite all of this depressing analysis, we are in fact the most affluent generation in all of history. When our grandparents had nothing to eat, that meant that there was not a morsel of food in the house. Today, when we have nothing to eat, it means we're not in the mood of getting in the car and driving to the nearest restaurant. It means that we're not in the mood of making something to eat from the myriad of ingredients that are in our pantry. Viktor Frankl said, survivor of the Holocaust, father of logotherapy, that ever more today, people have the means to live, but no meaning to live for. The means to live, but no meaning to live for. How do we find meaning? Modern society seems clueless to providing meaning in people's lives. Today, we're going to explore what answers we can find in the Torah and in Kabbalah. So let's go for this. L'chaim. Let's try to solve this crisis by turning inside and defining who we actually are. If we are going to find meaning, it would make sense that we should know who we actually are. Let's start by distinguishing between experiences that are pleasurable versus experiences that are meaningful. Please turn to exercise 1.1 on page 78. Sorry, page 6, I'm sorry. Page 6. Exercise 1.1. Can anybody describe at least one activity that brings you pleasure and is also meaningful? Anybody? What? Studying Torah, the daily Torah study. Okay, that's very interesting. I like that. Mordechai.
I was going to say reading a book.
Reading a book, it's pleasurable and it's meaningful. So it's interesting, both Corey and Mordechai shared wisdom. Andy.
Playing with grandkids.
Grandchildren. Pleasurable, meaningful. Let's move to the next question. What is an activity that brings you pleasure, but which is not meaningful? Pleasurable, but not meaningful.
Playing golf.
Playing golf. It's pleasurable, but it's meaningless. What was that? Dining. Pleasurable, but not meaningful. Fantastic. Food. Okay, good. Food. In contrast to the wisdom that was shared, or the grandchildren that was shared, right? So golf and dining. How about the last question? An activity that you find meaningful, but is not pleasurable. Meaningful.
Praying.
Praying, right? Meaningful, but not pleasurable. Mordechai, you remind me of the guy, of the rabbi who walks into the foyer, the lobby of the synagogue, and he sees little 8-year-old Moshele, who's standing in awe reading the plaques on the wall. So the rabbi stands silently beside little Moshele, and he says, Moshele, what are you doing? He says, I'm reading the plaques on the wall. Who are these people? So the rabbi smiles and he says, Moshele, these are the names of the people who died in the service. So Moshele is thinking for a while, and eventually he pipes up and he says, Rabbi, which service did they die in? Was it the Shabbos service or the weekday service? So it's meaningful, but it's not pleasurable. Anybody else? Another meaningful, not pleasurable? Yes, Ayat.
Visiting a terminally ill person.
Ooh. So it's not pleasurable visiting somebody who's dying, but it is certainly meaningful. If we had to find out, if we had to analyze what is a common denominator with that which is meaningful, why is it that the choices that were meaningful, what would you be able to put together here? This might require some reflection, but is there a common thread between those experiences that are meaningful? Why is it that wisdom, Torah, grandkids, visiting the sick, why is that meaningful? Yes, Gail. You're focusing on something other than yourself. Whereas if you focus on yourself, maybe that's going to be not so meaningful. Maybe pleasurable, but not meaningful. Interesting. Anybody else? Simone.
A countervailing argument would be that it's introspective, that you can take something that
Introspective.
very thoughtful and you can take insight.
Like the wisdom, the grandchildren, you can bring it in.
Or maybe.
So I want to go with what you're saying, Simone. I like that. When we do something which aligns with our identity, with who we are, when we manifesting on the outside, who we are on the inside, then that becomes meaningful. For example, the grandchildren. These are who we are, and you want to just spend time with them. Torah, right? Reading, wisdom, right? These are manifestations of who we are. But if you don't know who you are, then how could you ever find meaning? And maybe there's the problem. I mean, think of an artist. Think of a creative artist who, for whatever financial reasons, is forced to have a desk job. You know, I thank God I have 11 kids, and it's interesting to see the various personalities and characters of my children. What's good for one is not good for another. And we as parents have to be very, very careful, meticulous to give each child what we believe is suited to their personalities. But if you take the artist and you give them a desk job, this is not one size fits all. They're going to become miserable. They'll soon burn out because meaning is associated with alignment. When you're aligned on your outside with who you are on the inside, that's where you can find meaning. But when you're misaligned, the artist who is entering data into the computer, that's not going to give you meaning. You're going to burn out because people need authenticity to manifest their internal truth on the outside. So if you have a kind person who's put into a position where they have to be cutthroat and nasty to people, put him as a bouncer outside of a bar, that kind person is not going to find meaning until you transfer them to a hospital hospice ward, and there they're able to give compassion and gentleness and empathy to people that are most in need. Now they're going to find that meaning that they've been searching. Now, as people living in a world of distraction, in a modern day of distraction, we might not know what aligns with our core, but we do know what makes us feel good. It wasn't very difficult to ask people to give us examples of things that were meaningful, things that were pleasurable, things that were both, things that were one or the other. We know from empirical evidence, we know what makes us feel good and what doesn't. And with this principle that alignment leads to meaning, when we can identify, retro-engineer that which is meaningful, we might get a clue into who we are on the inside. But before we zoom in on our individual aptitude, let's zoom out for a moment. Let's zoom out of the individual detail and analyze humanity as a whole. And that's what we're going to do today, to try to use the wisdom of Torah and Kabbalah to analyze humanity as a whole, to understand who we are as human beings, so that we might be able to apply the alignment principle in order to be able to proactively engage in meaningful experiences, as opposed to happen to stumble upon them. There is an amazing verse in the Torah. This verse talks about the laws of war. Again, I was just in Israel yesterday, and it's amazing to see a country that is bustling. It is thriving, full of life. You'd think people are walking around the streets depressed. We looked out of our Airbnb window. We couldn't count the amount of cranes in our view of Jerusalem. Just endless amounts of cranes, construction. You'd think the place is nowhere near, missiles or rockets or the enmity of so many vicious nations. This is a nation obsessed with living and moving forward. So in the laws of war, the Torah tells us something startling about the definition of a human being. Take a look, page 7, text number 3. The Torah tells us when you besiege a city for many days, waging war against it to capture it, do not destroy its trees by wielding an axe against them. Can't chop down the trees. For from them you shall eat, and you shall not cut them down. For the tree of the field is a human, that you should besiege it. Ki ha'adam eitz hasadeh, for man is a tree. This is what the Torah tells us. A human being is a tree. Now, on a very literal level, what this means is that it says you shouldn't chop down a tree when you go out to battle your enemies, because what's the tree's fault? Is the tree a human? It's a rhetorical question. Is the tree a human that the tree deserves you to take your ire on the tree? Don't do that. Let the tree live. But on a deeper level, the Talmud, as we'll soon see, the Talmud does take it literally, telling us that a human being is a tree. And if we're able to understand, to unpack this this metaphor, if we could unpack this metaphor and understand why a human being is like a tree, we'd understand the wisdom that the Torah is teaching us about who we are, so that we'd be on the path to alignment and to finding meaning in our lives once we understand who we are, to learn how to express that on the outside. It's interesting that when Adam and Eve were first created, what was their first commandment? Do you remember? What was the first thing God tells Adam and Eve? Don't eat from the tree. Well, he said actually eat from the tree.
Yeah.
Eat from all the trees. Just one tree don't eat from. It was interesting that the first communication that God has with mankind is the trees. Also, it's interesting, the Talmud tells us that there are many different New Years. There's different kinds of beginning of the years for different elements of existence, but only one of them we celebrate as human beings, and that is the New Year of the trees. It's interesting. It's a curious custom that we celebrate Tu B'Shvat. Like, why would that be such a big deal? That on Tu B'Shvat we celebrate the New Year of the trees? Kabbalah tells us because human beings are trees. As a metaphor, not even a simile. Which means that the trees and the human beings hold a very profound connection. And the Kabbalah explains that this is because the trees hold the keys to us understanding ourselves. If I were to ask you, what do you think that means? What is the comparison between a human being and a tree? Can you think of any? It's actually exercise 1.2, if you want to write it down. Page 7. Can anybody think of a connection between a human being and the tree? Corey.
You have healthy roots in order to
You need
grow.
healthy roots in order to grow. Very nice. Anybody else? Healthy roots makes both are living. Nice. Living. Growing. Yeah.
Foundation of a tree, the higher it can go, the more winds it can withstand.
The stronger the foundation of the trees, the more winds it can withstand. That's interesting also that the roots are hidden. You don't see that part, right? And I know as a rabbi, as I talk to people in beautiful, meaningful, deep conversations, I've never found a person whose connection with his parents is imperfect that is actually complete. It's an interesting concept. If your roots aren't strong, even the parts that you don't see, it manifests on the outside. It's a very, very interesting phenomenon. Any other connections? Phyllis?
You need to be nourished and nourished.
Doesn't happen by itself. It needs to be tended to carefully. TLC. Anybody else?
They need a number of years to develop to the point where.
Doesn't happen overnight.
And also their roots are interlocked. They have a social structure with other trees.
Oh, social structure with other trees. Nice. Beautiful. Mordechai, last one?
Just like humans are all original and different in the way we are constructed, trees, and they all form and they're different and we're all
Oh, so there's different kinds of trees.
Yeah.
Many, many different kinds of trees. Beautiful. Fantastic. Okay. One thing that jumps right out that I don't think anybody mentioned is that humans are like trees because we align with our core. Like the tree that is permanently rooted in its spot that doesn't move. You know, animals wander. humans wonder, but the tree is a profound metaphor about values that are rooted in their source. Authenticity. That the tree doesn't betray its origins. It stays very loyal, devoted to its source. In exactly the same way, for the human being to thrive, he's got to be like a tree, connected deeply to his source. But what is that authenticity? What lies at the core? And we'll explore all of these ideas that we just mentioned. But what lies at the core of the human being that, like the tree, which for the tree it's easy, he gets its nourishment from the roots, the sap runs up to the branches, to the fruits, to the leaves, and he's connected. But the human being is a little more complex to understand who we are at our core for us to remember to plug in. I mean, it's like a cell phone. Your cell phone at the end of the day, it's on 1%. You really want to make sure to plug it into its power source so it can replenish. Imagine you could do that to yourself when you were feeling depleted, lonely, isolated, burnt out, anxious, depressed, afraid. Imagine you could just plug in. Wouldn't that be lovely? And wake up in the morning feeling all better, like a cell phone. This is what the trees are doing, and that is the question we're exploring right now. What is at the core? What is the self? What is the root of the human being, of humanity, for us to be able to be mindful of, so that we can emulate? And in today's lesson, I'd like to explore 4 components of the tree as taught by the Kabbalists, how we can use the tree as a profound and inspirational metaphor for us to be able to understand, yours truly, ourselves. And these 4 areas are growth, productivity, giving, and connection. Let's get started. So I'd like to begin by analyzing the Talmud on that first verse, which compares the human being to a tree. The Talmud takes this verse very literally. Take a look at page number 10, text 4. This is a Talmud from Tractate Tainis, analyzing this verse in the Torah. What is the meaning of the verse, for the tree of the field is a human? Talmud asks, is man actually a tree of the field? Earlier in the same verse that is written, from them you shall eat and you shall not cut them down. And it is written in the next verse, however, if it is a tree that you know is not a fruit-bearing tree, then you may destroy and cut it down. So which one is it? You're supposed to eat from the tree, but if it's not a fruit-bearing tree, then you're allowed to cut it down. This indicates, the Talmud says, that there are certain trees that may be cut down, and while others may not be destroyed. How so? And the Talmud answers, if a Torah scholar is worthy, from them you shall eat, and you shall not cut them down. But if he is not worthy, you may destroy and cut down. So what the Talmud is telling us here is, number one, we're taking this very literally. The Talmud, remember, is the oral Torah. This is the tradition given to Moses on Mount Sinai directly from God. So God is teaching Moses that this verse in the written Torah is to be taken literally, that man is literally a tree of the field, and that a human being, there's 2 kinds of human beings. There's a fruit-bearing tree and a non-fruit-bearing tree. There's a worthy scholar and a non-worthy scholar. It all depends on whether it's able to grow and produce fruits. If the tree produces fruit, if it's growing, this is good. If the tree is not producing fruit, if it's not growing, it can be cut down. It's not good. This is the first of 4 life lessons that we learn from the tree, that in order for a human being to be meaningful, to find meaning, we, like the tree, must be in a state of constant growth. See, at the core of our being is a need to grow. That's what the Talmud is telling us. We cannot ever say, I've paid my dues up north, I've built my synagogues up in Scarsdale or somewhere else, and now for the rest of my days, I'm going to vegetate on the beach and just watch the TV. That is a life which is now stagnant. It's no longer growing. That is the tree that can be chopped down. In order for us to experience meaning, we need to be like the tree that never ceases growing. Remember, a tree always grows upwards. And that's what King Solomon tells us in a beautiful way. In the next text, number 5 on page 11, he tells us, again, King Solomon is the wisest of all men. How many understand that the spirit of the human ascends on high, and the spirit of the beast ascends to the earth. Animals, their spirit go down. The human, their spirit rises like a flame. We are constantly aspiring higher. The moment you block a human being, like you put him in a communist environment, and you say you can no longer grow. This is your box. You're not able to reinvent yourself. You're not able to grow. That is a life robbed of meaning. We must constantly aspire to be able to grow. You see, when we indulge in luxuries and in personal pleasures, it might be pleasurable for a while, but we soon tire in a meaningful sense. But when we aspire, when we strive higher, it's then that we feel alive and fulfilled, because the first step to meaning, as interpreted from the tree, is mastery over the status quo. You know, in English, there's an interesting word, mensch. It's actually been anglicized into the English language. You'll see it in figure 1.2 on page 11. This word mensch has actually got its own adjective. Menschy. Did you know that Menschy is an adjective? He's a Menschy person, not a Menschy person, right? It's an adjective. It's not just a noun. It's actually an adjective. Now you know you made it in life, right? So, what does mensch actually mean? Mensch means human, right? When you say about somebody's a Menschy person, it means it's a human, right? Like what does that actually mean? The definition of human is to be able to overcome our impulse and to reinvent ourselves. Our Kabbalists tell us that the difference between a human and an animal is that an animal is horizontal, with the heart being a little lower, the brain being a little lower than the heart. Whereas a human being has the brain vertical above the heart. Whereas the animal is a slave to his impulse and his instinct. You don't find a cow or an ox that's gathering with his friends to be able to solve cow hunger or cow equality, right? But human beings, you find them being able, or aspiring at least, to solve their problems, to rise above their instincts. And that is the mark of a mensch, to be able to rise above our status quo, our default. Take a look at what Rabbi Mendy Hurston, Chabad Rabbi of New Jersey, head Rabbi of New Jersey, says on page 12 in text number 6. Makes an interesting observation, a colleague of mine. He writes, page 12, what is the Torah definition of human? A human has the capacity for self-assessment. A human has the mental and moral capacity to override impulse. Can a dog decide to go on a diet? A human can choose to follow his moral compass instead of his physical inclination. A human can calculate consequences beyond the immediate. This is the Torah description of a human. The Torah definition of a mensch, something we should all strive for, to reinvent ourselves. Interestingly, the term has different connotations when used in American parlance. When you call somebody a mensch in Yiddish, or when you say somebody's human in English, very different. When a person is weak and less than noble, impulse-driven, instead of morally focused, what do we say? What do we say about somebody who's impulse-driven? We say, listen, he's only human. So in American culture, human is a weakness. In our vernacular, Yiddish, recognizing that a person is human in American, human is acknowledging his inherent weakness. We see a human as inherently flawed and morally feeble. We cut a guy slack because we know he can't reach a noble goal. After all, he's only human. What can you really expect from this person of flesh and blood? Think about it. The Torah, or the Jewish term of human, is a mensch. It's something to strive for. While the American human is a fallback position in case of moral failure. So in a secular culture, being a human is a weakness. In Jewish or Yiddish, Being a mensch is greatness, not weakness. To be human, to be a mensch, is to overcome your defaults. If you're stingy by nature, stop being stingy. Become generous. When you say that somebody was a mensch, you mean that they overcame their instinct and they did it above and beyond the call of duty, right? If somebody's nasty by nature, maybe you're a narcissist, maybe you're selfish. No, make a decision. Do something kind. Like a narcissist once came to see the Rebbe, a young woman. She couldn't find a marriage partner. Shidduch. Walking down the streets of Jerusalem the other day, we saw a man walking down the street. He had a t-shirt on and he said, "We want my shidduch now. My shidduch is my soulmate." That's the plan. We want Mashiach now. We want my shidduch now. He was looking for a soulmate, right? He was carrying it on his sleeve, right? So this woman couldn't find a shidduch because I guess anybody she met realized that she's a narcissist. So she walks into a private audience of the Rebbe and she hands the Rebbe an analysis of herself. So the Rebbe is speed reading it, and the Rebbe says, "No, so what's the problem?" So she says, "Didn't you see the problem is?" So the Rebbe said, "I read it, but what's the problem?" So she says, "Well, in there it says that I'm a narcissist." So the Rebbe said, "No, so what's the problem? If you're a narcissist, then don't be a narcissist. Stop being a narcissist." And the Rebbe gave an example. If you're sitting at the lunchroom with your friends, then go get some water and say, "Does anybody else need some water? Would anybody like the salt?" Just take an action that can reinvent yourself. This is growth. This is being like a tree. If you're an angry person or a selfish person or a narrow-minded person, you can reinvent yourself. If you're secular, you can be faithful. People tell me, "Rabbi, I don't want to lay tefillah. I never did that before." So I say, good. That means that you're human and you can reinvent yourself and you can do something that you never did before. Mazel tov. Welcome to humanity. And now we can finally appreciate what the Talmud is telling us. Why the Torah is comparing a human being to a tree is because a man is in fact the tree of the field. Because our humanity is manifest through the obvious quality of the tree, which is the ability to transcend our nature, the ability to reinvent ourselves through growth, because trees never stop growing. Turns out that it's not how much you know that matters, but it's how much you've grown that makes you human, that gives you the power to find meaning in your life. On exercise 1.3, not for right now, but I want to encourage you later on to try to fill out exercise 1.3 on a very personal level. On page 13, exercise 1.3 is an exercise in self-improvement, which asks you in which ways have you grown and improved as a human being, which areas can still use improvement, and what are ways to implement that in your life. So try to see if you can fill that out later to try to identify, and to pinpoint meaning in your life. But that was the first of 4 parts of the tree that we'd like to unpack, to unload today in our class. Beyond growth, beyond the ability to grow, the tree produces fruit. The uniqueness of a tree, the Talmud tells us, is in fact its fruit. Take a look at what the Rebbe says on page 15. A tree, by definition, is meant to produce fruit. Like the verse says, a tree that produces fruit. That means it grows fruit in a way where its seed is within it, meaning that each fruit contains seeds that can grow into another tree. One tree can produce an apple, but an apple can produce countless trees. That's the power of the tree, to be able to create fruits. The mark of a tree is not its height, it's not the lush leaves, it's the fruit. That's how the Torah defines the tree in this verse in Genesis 1:11. In the same way, the Kabbalists tell us that humans need to be like a tree because we have a basic, foundational, essential need to contribute. As human beings, we need to be able to be productive. It's not going to help us when we say, I've done my part. I'm no longer going to build, to grow, to volunteer, to make a difference. From now on, it's all about me. That's a life that's very quickly going to lead to meaninglessness. Now, why is it so important to produce? Why is it so important to be productive? It's a very interesting law in Torah. It's a law that teaches us about productivity and the importance of productivity. It's a law of the fruit of a tree. You know, if you have a tree that grows for 3 years, you're not allowed to enjoy its fruit for the first 3 years. Have you ever heard of that law? It's called the law of Orla. O-R-L-A. Orla. Orla means that in the first 3 years of a tree's life, you're not allowed to eat of its fruits. After 3 years, you can. But the Talmud gets into an interesting question. What happens, the Talmud asks, if you graft a new tree, a new branch onto an old tree? So the old tree is more than 3 years old, but the new branch is less than 3 years old. And now you graft it together, the new branch on the old tree. The fruit that grows, is it subject to the prohibition of 3 years because it's a new branch? Or is it exempt because it's an old tree? Interesting question. Anybody have any ideas? What do you think? Arlene? Donna? Don't eat it. Well, that's the easy way out, just a blanket ban. Yes, Mordechai?
Both answers apply, could be, based on, could be the 3 years or.
You're saying it could be either. Well, what does it depend on? So the Talmud, you're right. The Talmud says it depends. It depends on if the new branch relies on the old sap or not. What's dominant here? Is it the new branch which generates the sap, or is it the old tree that generates the sap? If it's the new branch, then it's under 3 years old. If it's the old tree, then it's over 3 years old. But how do you know the difference? And here the Talmud tells us something fascinating. Text number 8, page 16. From the Jerusalem Talmud tractate Orla, how can one determine, the Talmud asks, whether the young tree is self-reliant or not, the young branch? Said Rabbi Bibi. You heard of Rabbi Bibi?
Yeah. Right.
Said Rabbi Bibi in the name of Rabbi Chanina, if the leaves of the young tree are turned inward toward itself, one may be sure that it lives from the old tree. But if the leaves are turned toward the old tree, one may be sure that the young one is self-sustaining. Fascinating. Why is that? Rabbi Yehuda Bar Chanan said, he explained, here is a sign. One who eats from their friend is ashamed to look at them. If the branch is feeding from the origin, from the old tree, its leaves will turn away from the old tree because it's embarrassed to face its source of nourishment. But if it's self-sustaining, then it has no problem. The leaves will face the origin tree. And now I don't know how this works on a horticultural on a landscaping level. Not my expertise, but the lesson, what?
Horticultural.
That's exactly what I meant, right? But on a spiritual level, what this means is that a human being has got an inherent sense of shame from the ones who support him, and a person has a profound sense of dignity, of self-esteem when they are self-supporting. What we learn from this piece of Talmud is that productivity repels shame. When we're self-productive, when we're self-reliant, we're not embarrassed. But when we are reliant on someone else, we are embarrassed of them, because this is a foundational human need to be self-reliant and to be independent. This is a foundational human need, which is why the Talmud tells us, text number 9, right over the page 17, that a person would rather have one measure of their own over 9 measures of their friends. In other words, if you were able to receive $1,000 via government handout, or $100 that you earned all by yourself through your blood, sweat, and tears, which one would you go for?
$100 a month.
The money that you earned is yours. You own it. You feel like a mensch. The money that you got from someone else, okay, you can enjoy it, fine. But there's something missing, because a human being is like a tree that needs to be productive. This is why people will spend so many hours making misshapen scarves or imperfect cakes. They'll launch a business which is far from perfect. We'll spend time writing or gardening or teaching or organizing or mentoring, because we have a foundational inherent need to contribute, to make a meaningful difference. The drive to earn our keep and to give back, because man is the tree of the field. We are wired in such a way that if we don't contribute, we are lacking in meaning. We are lacking in direction. And I want to encourage you later to do the exercise on 1.4, page 17, which is a personal exercise on your own productivity. In which ways have you been or are currently productive? In which areas can be more productive? And what are some ways to implement this in your life? A beautiful exercise for you to try to aspire towards more meaning in your life as we become aware of who we are. If I'm a tree, then like a tree, I need to be aligned with my core. What is my core? I've got to be connected to my inside and my outside. What is that? We spoke about 2 out of 4 so far. We said a tree's got to keep on growing. We got to keep on reinventing ourselves. And the second thing we said is that we've got to be productive. We've got to be contributing. We've got to be making a difference in order to feel a sense of value, a sense of self-esteem. Let's move on to the third. The third element of the tree is influence. Giving. Helping others. In the 3rd century, a Talmudic sage by the name of Rabbi Nachman of the Talmud was visited by his friend Rabbi Yitzchak from the Holy Land. Rabbi Nachman was living in Babylon, Iraq, and his friend Rabbi Yitzchak came from Israel. After they had a good meal together and learned and studied and grew, Rabbi Nachman, who himself was a wealthy man, politically connected and part of the Jewish aristocracy, asked his guest, Rabbi Yitzchak, to bless him. This next piece of Talmud has become a beautiful source of inspiration. Many songs have been made out of this piece of Talmud. Take a look at page 19, text number 10, as to the blessing that Rabbi Yitzchak gives to Rabbi Nachman. When they were taking leave of one another, Rabbi Nachman said to Rabbi Yitzchak, Master, give me a blessing. Rabbi Yitzchak said to him, I will tell you a parable. This situation of you asking me for a blessing is comparable to one who was walking through a desert and who was hungry, tired, and thirsty. He found a tree, an oasis, whose fruits were sweet and whose shade was pleasant, and a stream of water flowed beneath it. He ate from the fruits of the tree. He drank from the water in the stream, and he sat in the shade of the tree. When he wished to leave, he said, Tree, tree, with what shall I bless you? Ilan, ilan, b'amei avarechecha. If I say to you that your fruits should be sweet, your fruits are already sweet. If I say that your shade should be pleasant, your shade is already pleasant. If I say that a stream of water should flow beneath you, a stream of water already flows beneath you. Rather, I bless you as follows. May it be God's will that all saplings that they plant from you be like you. So it is with you, said Rabbi Yitzchak to his host. With what shall I bless you, Rabbi Nachman? If I bless you with Torah, you already have Torah. If I bless you with wealth, you already have wealth. If I bless you with children, you already have children. Rather, may it be God's will that your offspring shall be like you. The blessing that Rabbi Nachman is given by Rabbi Yitzchak is the blessing of influence upon his environment. Unique to the trees is their ability to provide shade and food to others in exactly the same way. Human beings need not only to grow, and which is self-improvement, and not only to be productive, but also to know that we're making a meaningful difference, that we're actually making a difference in the lives of other people, that we're actually benefiting our environment, we're benefiting others. And modern psychologists agree very much with this notion, as you'll see Hicks and King on page 21. These two PhDs put it very beautifully, in, as they say right up here in text number 11, page 21. There is great comfort in believing that your life and actions matter in the grand scheme of things. This conviction is referred to as existential mattering and is a strong component of the experience of meaning in life. While the concept of existential mattering often evokes images of famous and infamous people who have done extraordinary things in their lives, you don't actually have to be famous. Many people gain a sense of mattering through avenues more easily traversed. Research shows that feeling that you have made a positive influence on others is unsurprisingly almost always associated with the belief that your life is meaningful. If you can make a difference to someone else's life, that is going to be associated with feeling meaningful. Existential mattering then is often rooted in the sense that you matter to others. From helping strangers in need and providing social support to loved ones to simply being a reliable friend. This Shabbos, we have a very special guest coming to our community. Rabbi Manis Friedman is YouTube's most popular rabbi. And he's actually under a lot of fire on YouTube, social media, for a position that he holds, rooted in Torah, that God needs us. He's been subject to a lot of criticism on social media from rabbis that are trying to troll him, if you know what that means. To troll him. They say that how could you possibly say that God needs us? But in truth, the Torah tells us God needs us. We are not just here as as just travelers passing through. We are actually needed by God, and He teaches, as you'll teach here on Saturday night at the parenting seminar. He teaches that the most important thing we could tell our children is not that we love them, but that we need them. That we need them, because a person needs to feel needed. If they're just loved, it's great, but it's not enough to provide them with that profound sense of meaning. When we help others, you know what it feels like when we help others. On Saturday night, I was in Ben Yehuda in Jerusalem with my family, and El just reminded me that a video that he saw must have been on social media. There was a man walking by on crutches. And he sort of signaled to me that he needed help. I went right over to him and I tied his shoelaces. I felt so good. This man who couldn't bend over because he was on crutches. I felt so amazing to be able to do something so simple, not even realize it was going to hit social media. But when we help others, it might exhaust us. You know, when you volunteer, when you give up your time, but even though we might feel exhausted, we're not depleted. We feel fulfilled because it's our human nature to give. This idea is not new to the two Hicks and King over here in the PhDs. Rabbi Akiva, 2,000 years ago, already taught this to us. When Rabbi Akiva was arrested by the Romans and ultimately he was executed for teaching Torah, he was incarcerated, and his prize student, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, came over and he says, Rabbi, teach me Torah. And Rabbi Akiva didn't want to teach him Torah for whatever reason. Ultimately, when Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai persisted, he said, Rabbi, I want you to teach. The words of Rabbi Akiva in response are amazing. An amazing expose to human nature. Text number 12, page 22. Rabbi Akiva responded. He said, my son, more than the calf desires to nurse, the cow wants to give milk. More than the calf wants to nurse, the mother wants to feed. What Rabbi Akiva was saying, that I know that you want to study Torah for me. More than you want to study Torah for me, I want to teach you. I want to share with you. You know, if you're a writer, if you're a speaker, if you're a thinker, you know the amazing feeling when you have an idea in your head and you want to share it with the world. It's like exploding within you. You want to bring it out because the human nature is to want to share, to produce fruits, to be productive, to give it out, and to make sure that we're giving to other people, just like the tree. It's interesting, King David complained to God about financial inequality in the world. He said, why are there some people that are rich and there are some people that are poor? This isn't fair, said King David. Why would you do this, God? And God's answer is amazing. Take a look at page 22, text 13. King David said to God, Master of the universe, establish equity in your world by making rich and poor the same. God replied, if such were the case, that everybody was at exactly the same amount, if such were the case, who would preserve kindness and truth? If all were rich or all were poor, who would be able to do acts of kindness? Wow.
So does that say that rich people don't do acts of kindness?
No, what that's saying is that God debited the poor and credited the rich with that debit so that the rich would be able to have the opportunity to give to the poor. Because a world in which we would not need to give to each other would be a world without meaning. And that's why God created financial inequality in the world in order to allow this extraordinary exchange of resources, because it's part of the fabric of human identity. Amazing, right? In American culture, in American law, if you're poor, a person who's indigent, I don't believe they have to pay taxes. Am I right? I don't think they have to pay taxes. But in Torah, it doesn't work that way. In Torah, it doesn't matter how much money you have or don't have. You are always obligated to give tzedakah, to give charity. Now, it makes sense that in American law, the poor don't need to give. Makes sense. What are they going to give already? Why would the Torah say that the poor are obligated to give? But now we understand. Because the objective is not to provide for the poor, for the receiver, as much as it is to provide meaning for the giver. And why should the poor person be robbed of that extraordinary opportunity? Take a look, text 14. The Code of Jewish Law says everyone is obligated to give charity. Even a poor person who relies on charitable support themselves must give from what they receive. We're obligated to give a tithe, 10% of our earnings at minimum. We're obligated to give not because the receiver needs to receive, but because the giver needs to give. Every person needs to contribute to society, just like the tree that produces those fruits. Modern science, by the way, agrees that giving gives much more pleasure to us than taking. In other words, how we use our money is far more important than how much money we have when it comes to happiness and meaningfulness. In 2008, a study discovered that spending had far less to do with happiness than helping others had to do with happiness. What happened was there was a study where company employees were all given a bonus. And the ones who spent their bonus on helping others reported far higher levels of happiness than the ones who spent the bonus on themselves. It was regardless of the size of the bonus. Even a $5 bonus was able to boost happiness indicators significantly in those who used the $5 to help someone else, even if they bought them a soda. Whilst most people feel that spending on themselves will make them happier, it's not actually the case. Giving is wired into our humanity, into our identity. Yeah.
Something that's so personal and long lasting. During the Depression, my grandma,
Great Depression of 1929?
when they came to the country, 1929, my grandma would wrap up some pennies on Shabbat and the cloth and drop them down to people who needed it even more than she did.
Wow.
And so from that lesson and from the lesson of her continuous giving, enabled me to just think it was part of my identity.
It's amazing. I'm trying to repeat that story. So Phyllis is saying that her grandmother during Great Depression, you can imagine, people didn't want to eat in the Great Depression, was making sure to drop a few pennies down the balcony or something to the people that needed it even more. And that's what really formed who you are today. Very, very interesting. There's another story about that. You remind me of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was a simple shepherd who married the daughter, the heiress of the wealthiest man in town. His name was Kalba Savua. It's a beautiful story in the Talmud. Problem was that Kalba Savua, the father-in-law, did not approve of the marriage. So the moment his daughter married him, eloped, he disinherited his daughter and her husband. So both Rabbi Akiva and his wife, Rachel, were penniless. They were destitute. Can you imagine this princess is destitute? The story goes in the Talmud that one night, in a particularly low night when they were sad, depressed, maybe miserable, a knock on the door. It was Elijah the prophet disguised as a human being. And he said, when they opened the door, he said, my wife has just given birth, but we don't have straw. We don't have hay for her to lay on the floor. Could you give us some hay? And Rabbi Akiva, who himself was indigent, but they had hay, was able to give them a few handfuls of hay. And he turned to his wife and he said, see how fortunate we are that we're still able to give. And the Talmud says that was not a real story. That was Elijah the prophet who was coming in order to boost their spirits. Why? By giving them, these indigent, poverty-stricken couple, the ability to give to someone else. And in exercise 1.5 on page 23, I'd like to encourage you a little later to try to find the time to see if you could fill out this exercise on how you're able to impact others. The questions are: in which ways have you been or are currently helping others spiritually, emotionally, or financially? And in which areas are you able to increase in your giving to help you find even more meaning in your life? Finally, I'd like to take on the fourth and final attribute of the tree that we can analyze today in our Kabbalistic analysis. The first we said is the tree always grows. The second we said the tree produces fruits. The third is that the tree is giving shade, giving to others. And finally, a foundational human need is relationships. Modern studies tell us that more than anything, people find meaning in DMCs, deep and meaningful conversations, deep and meaningful relationships. Take a look at how this scientist writes in text 15, page 25. If you ask people what their most significant sources of meaning are in life are, they perhaps unsurprisingly list their close relationships. That's because one of the pillars of a meaningful life is a sense of belonging. When people feel like they belong, according to psychologists Leary and Baumeister, it's because they're in a relationship with others based on mutual care. One might think that meaning is found in solitary reflections at sunrise on the beach, but not so. What the Kabbalah is telling us, that it's a sense of connection with others, a sense of belonging. Think of how you felt when you genuinely reached out to someone else with empathy, somebody else in need. Think of how good that made you feel, because in addition to the giving component of the tree, you also have the connecting component of the tree. Where do trees have connections, by the way? Somebody mentioned it earlier, that the trees are deeply connected. You know, the Californian redwoods, those towering giants, 600 feet up in the sky. Their roots are very shallow, in fact. They're 12 or 13 feet under the ground. How could they possibly sustain? Scientists discovered that what happens with these roots is that they actually fuse into each other, creating an unshakable foundation of hundreds of tens of square miles of roots that are fused together so that there's a plate under the ground which is shallow but is super strong, because the roots grow together. And when they grow together under the ground, whatever's above the ground is not going anywhere. The secret is in the roots. And why is it that relationships are so important to human beings? Why is it that we human beings are hardwired to be in meaningful connections and relationships with others? It's interesting. The Torah tells us that when God created Adam and Eve, it's in the Torah here. Take a look on page 25, 16a. It says, God formed the human from the dust of the earth, and he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the human became a living being. He became a living being. Now, Onkelos lived 2,000 years ago. He was the most famous commentary on the Torah. Onkelos was actually a Roman nephew of the evil Titus, who destroyed our second temple. in a beautiful long story, Onkelos asked his uncle for life advice. His uncle told him to invest in that which is cheap today, and later on will be worth far more. So what did Onkelos do? He became a Jew. In the Roman times, it was very disrespected to be a Jew. But later on, he figured it's going to be worthy. So he became a Jew, and his uncle was very upset about it. But Onkelos ultimately became the greatest commentary of all of Torah for the past 2,000 years. The first one ever to translate the Torah into any other language. He translated it into Aramaic. And what did he do? If you take a look at the next text, the translations of Onkelos are prophetic, are precise. Take a look at how he translates the word, and man became a living being. Here's what he says. God created man, dust from the earth, and he breathed into his nostrils the soul of life, and the human became a speaking spirit. So Onkelos translates the words, a living being, nefesh chaya, he translates it as a speaking spirit, a communicator. Because what Onkelos is teaching us here 2,000 years ago is that a human being at his core, at his very creation, was infused with the need to communicate with others. And this is what makes us alive. Our ability to speak to others. That's why it's so painful to put someone into solitary confinement, because as human beings, we need to connect with others. To be human means to be a communicator. Maimonides, 850 years ago, corroborates, he concurs the same idea in text 17 when he says that human beings are social by nature, and their nature compels them to gather together with others. They are not like other living creatures which have no necessity to congregate. Rather, their nature requires social gatherings as an absolute necessity. Like trees, we need to connect with others. A tree that grows alone in the forest could easily fall over, could easily be affected. But trees that grow amongst other trees are the ones that grow straight, are the ones that are strong, are the ones that don't fall. Because to be a communicator is not just a hobby. To connect in deep and meaningful connections with other human beings is not just an extracurricular optional activity. It is what defines us. And again, a little later, I'd like to encourage you to take a look at exercise 1.6, to ask yourself the tough questions, page 27, to ask yourself the tough questions of the state of your personal relationships. What relationships are you currently in that are fulfilling and that are providing you with meaning? And what relationships can you still cultivate, create, or mend to provide you more meaning? You know, we have guests over here today, Katie and Eric from Northern California. They're from Fresno, not too far from the Golden Gate Bridge, right? And there's an amazing story of a psychologist by the name of, I'm not sure if he's a psychologist, I think he's a psychologist, Dr. Jerome Motto, who investigated the apartment of a man who jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge. Tragically, the site of many, many suicides. And this man had jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge. So for whatever reason, Dr. Motto in Northern California was investigating the apartment. What he found, there was something so jarring, so startling. He discovered a note. And on the note it said, I'm going to the Golden Gate Bridge and I'm going to take my own life. The only thing that will stop me is if on the way to the Golden Gate, even one person stops and smiles at me, then I will not do it. As a result, Dr. Jerome Motto started a whole organization about acknowledging other people and smiling at other people, and how you can literally change people's lives by merely acknowledging their presence. I'd like to sum up what we've learned so far in this brief video presentation.
We live in an age of unprecedented freedom. Go anywhere, do anything, and still hollow inside. Comfort surrounds us. Warmer homes, softer beds, but comfort alone doesn't satisfy the soul. Wealth is at an all-time high. Packages always arriving, gadgets galore, and yet so many feel empty. Security has never been higher. Passwords, alerts, cameras everywhere, and still, anxiety is at an all-time high. So if security, wealth, comfort, and freedom can't fill us, what can? The Torah says we're like trees. Want to feel alive? Watch the tree. Here are 4 lessons. A tree never stops growing. We're the same. Our souls crave steady inner growth. Trees are productive. Just look at their fruit. We're wired like that too. We feel fulfilled when we generate sweet, lasting, meaningful deeds. Fruit isn't for the tree, it's for giving. Our souls are the same. We feel deep joy specifically when we share and care. A tree intertwines its roots with other trees, lending each other support. We need that too. Relationships are our source of strength. True freedom is growth. True comfort is productivity. True wealth is giving. True security is in relationships. So feed your soul and watch your life bloom.
If we return back to Ecclesiastes, to Kohelet, with which we opened up, when King Solomon said, what is the purpose of a man's effort, a man's toil under the sun? We can recognize that perhaps what King Solomon is telling us, that it's not about amassing fortune because you're climbing, you're barking up the wrong tree. If you're trying to support yourself, if you're trying just to take, you're never going to find happiness. It's about changing gears. It's about giving. It's about being productive. It's about discovering meaning through alignment, through living in sync with your inner truth. What we've learned is that meaning, we learned what alignment looks like. We learned that alignment is taught to us through the tree, that knowing yourself, who you are, so that you can grow as a manifestation of your core. We learned that beyond improvement is producing results of value, not just consuming, but creating. A third point, we learned that giving is something we do not just because there's people that need to receive, but because we need to give. And finally, we learned that the importance of the deep sense of connection. What Kabbalah has done for us today is to provide a map from within, not by escaping ourselves, but by having the courage to face ourselves. Yet, many who practice this principle, these principles of growing, of giving, of creating, and of connecting, can still feel a hollow sense of emptiness gnawing from within. Could there still be something deeper still? That is something which we'd like to discover next week in lesson 2. But before we conclude, I'd like to ask you please to bear with me on a brief 5-minute guided meditation. I'd like to guide you please on trying to internalize what we've already learned today. You know, the word Chabad is an acronym for the 3 steps of intellectual processing. Chachma, Bina, Da'at means idea, understanding, and then feeling. We've gone through the process of idea and understanding, but to be able to take an understanding, a bina, and turn it into a das, into a feeling, that happens through the process of guided thinking, focused thinking, also known as meditation. So bear with me if you don't mind. If you're not comfortable, that's fine. But if you are, then just flow with me, please. Please try to breathe in deeply through your nose and hold it for a few moments. Breathe out through your mouth. Take a slow, deep breath in and release it gently as you close your eyes. As you continue to breathe deeply in through your nose and hold it, and breathe out when you're ready, feel yourself arriving right here, right now. Let the noise of the day drift away. As your deep breaths allow your body to soften, your shoulders to release. With each breath, you become a little more still a little more present. Imagine yourself standing barefoot upon soft, living earth. The soil is warm beneath you, rich and alive. From the soles of your feet, roots begin to grow, strong, steady, reaching deep into the ground. They anchor you. They nourish you. These roots are your values, your truth, the things that hold you steady when your world sways. Feel that quiet stability rising through you, calm, grounded, centered. Whisper to yourself, I am rooted. I draw strength from what is real within me. As you continue to breathe deeply in through your nose, holding it for a few seconds, and out through your mouth. Try to sense your trunk, tall, upright, unwavering. You are growing upward, always reaching, always becoming. Each ring within you tells a story of storms weathered, of lessons learned, and strength gained. Growth isn't about perfection. It's about stretching toward the light. Each breath expands you. Each challenge refines you. I am growing. Every experience helps me evolve. Feel your branches spreading wide into the open air. From them hang leaves, blossoms, and fruit, the visible signs of all you give and create. Every idea, every kind word, every effort to care or build, these are your fruits. Some nourish you. Others feed people and lives you'll never see. I am productive, I create, and I contribute with purpose. In through your nose and out through your mouth. Now feel the quiet pulse of life moving through you. From your roots to your trunk, from your trunk to the branches. Notice how your shade stretches wide, offering coolness and rest to anyone who steps beneath it. Birds nest amongst your branches. Travelers pause under your canopy. Your fruits feed people and animals alike. You give freely, shelter, nourishment, beauty, and in giving, you grow stronger. Your giving doesn't empty you, it completes you. I am generous. I share my shade, my fruit, and my strength. Now see beyond yourself an entire forest surrounding you. Trees of every shape and color, each rooted in the same soil, each reaching toward the same sky. Beneath the surface, your roots intertwine, silent connections unseen but strong. You draw from the same ground, breathe the same air, bask in the same sunlight. You are part of something vast, alive, and beautiful. I am connected. Together, we make life thrive. Now try to feel the warmth of sunlight pouring down through your branches. You've stood through wind and rain, through heat and storm. You bend, but you do not break. Each season, you renew yourself. You realize that your strength doesn't come from resisting life, but from being rooted, open, and giving. Your shade comforts those who rest beneath you. Your fruit feeds generations to come. And the more you give, the deeper your roots grow, the stronger your trunk becomes, the more alive your forest becomes around you. Take a slow, deep breath in. And as you exhale, feel balanced, grounded, quietly powerful. When you're ready, gently open your eyes, carrying with you the awareness. Like a tree, I am grounded, growing, giving, connected, and built to last. Let's summarize, quick review on what we learned today.
Lesson 1. The meaning we seek. 1. Although we live in an era of unprecedented prosperity, depression, anxiety, and substance abuse have reached record levels globally. One of the root causes of the current mental health crisis epidemic is a lack of meaning, a feeling that life is an exercise in futility. 2. We feel meaningful, complete, and settled when we act in ways that are aligned with our core, and we lack meaning when we suffer from misalignment. 3. Based on the Torah's comparison of humans to trees, we identified 4 qualities that define our identities: growth, productivity, helping others, and genuine relationships. 4. We humans are defined by our capacity for growth. We are distinguished from animals in our capacity to control our instincts and work on ourselves to grow and improve. When we are growing, we are expressing our essential humanity, and thus we feel complete. 5. The mark of our success is not only what we are, but what we produce. We have a deep human need to be a contributor, not a person who is dependent on the largesse of others. 6. The desire and need to give to others is hardwired into our human identity, and we can only feel fulfilled when we are benefiting the world around us. 7. Jewish thought has always described the human being as a communicator, capable of connecting with others deeply and spiritually. Tapping into this deepest part of our being provides us with an incredible sense of meaning.
This class meaningful today, and that you've gained some tools to be able to apply in the most beautiful and meaningful way in Palm Beach Gardens, in the gardens, the trees which surround us all, to be able to never see a tree again in the same way, but to be able to reflect, to apply the profound lessons of the tree, to be able to find ever deeper meaning in our lives, to be able to make them more meaningful, more wholesome, and more happy. Next week, God willing, we'll go even deeper to find yet another layer of depth that lies behind the human comparison to the tree. I hope that you'll join us. If you haven't done so yet, Esty will be happy to sign you up to the course, to have you join us next week. And as always, I love to take your comments, your reflections, and your critique. Feel free to send me an email to rabbi@jewishgardens.com. Love to hear from you and love to share with your ideas. Thank you very much for joining me today.